I've always wanted to be really good at drawing. As an aspiring writer, I love the idea of imagining something in my world and then being able to just draw it with total freedom like Tolkien sketches in his books. The problem is I'm super short on time, because the Kickstarter of my book is about to launch in a few days and I have a ton of marketing to do. So for this challenge, I'm giving myself 24 hours to get as good at drawing as I possibly can in the little time that I have. Speaking of my book, it's a heist-style fantasy thriller about trying to slay a tyrannical dragon in a world where dragons rule. If that sounds like your thing, check out the Kickstarter page down below and click notify me on launch. People seem to really like the book, and I'm sure you will too. And it's the best way to support the channel. Now, I'm not actually starting 100% from scratch. I used to draw quite a bit in high school, but it's been so long since I've drawn anything, and lately anytime I try, I just give up before I get anywhere with it. I think the first step before I start learning anything new is going to be to see if I can still do the basics. One of the simplest things to draw is a shaded sphere and a cube in perspective, so I tried giving that a go real quick and then put it all together by drawing a simple real-life object. Also, I feel like I remember that drawing boxes and beans is important, so I spent some time drawing some, and I feel like it went pretty well. I guess the reason these are important is because when you're drawing people or creatures, it's a lot easier if you break them down into simpler shapes first, and arranging those shapes in different configurations will be important when the time comes to draw people in different poses. With that out of the way, it was time to start getting serious. I have 4 main goals for this challenge. 1. Get really good at faces. I think given how important faces are, they deserve extra attention. 2. People. As in people doing different stuff like fighting or talking and being able to show personality and conflict and body language. That will be important if I want to draw scenes from my books. 3. Landscapes. I've always had trouble with landscapes, but I love mountains and I definitely want to be able to draw outdoor scenes in beautiful places. Finally, 4. Creatures. Mainly dragons or fantastical monsters of various kinds. I would need to be able to draw these from my imagination rather than from looking at a reference that doesn't exist. Let's start with faces. I ended up picking up a course that focused on drawing faces, but the problem is there are 22 hours of lessons just in the course. So I'm going to have to cut corners even if I just want to at least dabble in all 4 of the categories that I want to learn. Right away, there were a few problems. I realized too late that the course focused on charcoal drawing, but I only had normal graphite pencils. That meant I had to make a lot of modifications to the techniques, especially when it came to shading, because it turns out charcoal is actually really different from graphite. The other problem had to do with anatomy. There were some extremely useful explanations of the different subtle shapes in a person's face, but it made me wonder if I'm really supposed to add all these details of the bones and the muscles and slowly erase them as I go every single time. That seems like a lot of work.
First I draw this head, then I erased some of the more detailed features.
This is especially tricky when drawing full people, and the tip of my sharpened pencil feels bigger than a lot of these finer details. But other than those misgivings, I was really happy with how much I learned. The course taught a very useful measurement system, and breaking the face down into basic shapes was super helpful. I noticed that a lot of the shading was a lot like drawing those beans from earlier. Every part of the face was kind of like shading a little subsphere. I was happy with some of my exercises, but when it came time to do the final portrait, I was very disappointed. It didn't look at all like the woman's photo, and it felt almost cartoony, and I wasn't sure why. I decided to give it one more try and draw a different character, which was not going very well either. After noticing some glaring issues with it, trying to fix them all over again, working on it for hours and burning almost half the time of the challenge, I finally managed to get it to a point where I was pretty proud of it and I showed it to my friend. To my disappointment and embarrassment, he essentially said it looked like a dude in makeup.
More like belongs in the trash!
So that kind of shattered my confidence, but I had to admit the truth was that there were still problems with this drawing, but I couldn't pin down exactly what. That was when I remembered something I learned in high school art class. You can often cover part of your drawing to try to isolate where the problem is. I noticed for my drawing, the entire right half of her face actually looked pretty good in isolation. So I did a bit more work redoing the entire left side of the face, and I think it was worth the extra effort. It's not perfect, but it's definitely the best face drawing I've ever made, and a massive improvement from the previous portrait. Given the fact that I've burned a lot of time on faces already, and I still have 3 other things to learn, I decided to call it here, and I'll get back to practicing once the challenge is over. The next step was to learn to draw landscapes. I like the idea of doing some preliminary practice on my own just to sort of see what my initial baseline is. So I tried drawing this photo I took of Cascade Mountain near Banff, Alberta, and it did not go well at all. I had no idea which details to focus on or how to translate the different levels of shadow from the photo to the paper, and the biggest challenge was in making the cliffs actually look like stone. As it stands, my drawing just looks like a mess of scribbles. It was clear to me that I needed a change in strategy if I wanted to learn to draw mountains. So instead of drawing based on a photo, I decided to copy a sketch just to learn the actual techniques, because I figured it would be a lot easier to see what someone else did with the same tool I'm using rather than to try to essentially reinvent these techniques from scratch. The result ended up up being a pretty good looking mountain. A huge improvement from my previous attempt, that's for sure. I'm pretty happy with this. I can't say I definitely know how to draw landscapes now, and I need a lot more practice, but for the purpose of this challenge, I think this is a good level of initial progress. That leads me to another very important point. Halfway through this challenge, I realized, yeah, I can't learn to draw in 24 hours. I'm definitely not going to be able to draw anything from my imagination, that's for sure. All the pros out there say you need to practice the basics for a few minutes every day, which is the exact opposite of what I'm doing. So once this challenge is done, I'm gonna try to do just that. A little bit of practice, but staying consistent. With landscapes done for now, it was time to start drawing people. As with mountains, I decided to do a preliminary attempt first. I know that when drawing people, one of the most important things to do isn't just to simplify the shapes, but to also get the motion of the pose down in a technique called gesture drawing. I've seen this done in different ways, but from my understanding, it amounts to simplifying and emphasizing specific lines that most strongly denote the general motion of the pose. I tried doing this with scenes from movies, and my result was once again not that good. I ended up watching a lot of different videos on drawing people, but eventually I settled on following along with gesture drawing exercises where you'd have to draw the pose in a matter of seconds before moving on to the next one. These were a lot more useful and varied than trying to draw movie scenes because they are specifically designed to focus on a broad variety of poses. This challenge was surprisingly super helpful. My first few gestures were really bad, scribbly, and awkward, but eventually I started getting the important parts of the poses down. But with limited time remaining, I had to get moving. I needed to draw a fully detailed character. Unfortunately, after spending a few hours trying to do this, I have not been able to produce anything that I'm proud of enough to show. Going from gesture to full character is hard, and I've definitely missed a lot of steps. What I should have done instead, and what I'm going to do in the future, was at least try converting the gesture drawings into simple mannequins made of cubes and cylinders. After all this work, I only have 4.5 hours to draw my final project, and I have nothing to show for my figure drawing. I'm glad I got the experience of learning more about gesture, but ultimately, drawing people has turned out to be a failure. My hope from here was to spend some time drawing creatures like animals or fantasy monsters, but I want my last drawing to be really good, and I think 4 hours might not even be enough time. My plan was to put everything I learned together into one big drawing with a mountainous background and a guy fighting a dragon. There were 3 huge problems with trying to do that. 1, obviously I wasn't confident I could draw the guy. 2, I had no practice with creatures yet, and 3, I didn't even scratch the surface of drawing from the imagination. There was no way I could confidently go from what I know now to arranging this perfect drawing. It was just way too ambitious. That was when I knew it was time to switch to plan B. Since I didn't have time to practice with creatures yet, I thought, why not make my last drawing a creature? This came with some risk, since I was kind of scared that this wouldn't work and ruin the whole challenge, and potentially mean I wouldn't have anything impressive for the thumbnail. But I wanted to try, and so I found a picture of a dragon and just started drawing. After the initial measurements I learned about in the Faces course and starting the outline, my confidence started to gradually grow ever so slightly. It actually looked okay so far. Progress started to come along. I wasn't really sure in what order to approach this drawing, but I tried to follow the general guideline of going from general to specific. I wasn't sure if I should start with big shadow groups or just go right into the details, since the dragon is covered in little scales and each have their own subtle curve, which means each has their own shading. I decided to ignore a lot of the scale texture and just focus on the shading for a while. Unfortunately, at a certain point, my camera's card became full and I didn't really have the time to upload everything, so I decided to continue and record some progress on my phone, so I apologize for the shakiness. Anyway, progress was coming along great, and the more I kept going, the more excited I was about the final result. Now, this still isn't from my imagination, it's still using a reference image, but being able to apply all the techniques I learned from drawing faces into this drawing reveals just how broadly applicable basic techniques can be. As time began to run out, I focused on the dragon's neck and scales. After some meticulous polishing, I'm happy to say it's finally done. I'm very happy with how this one turned out. This is the best drawing I've ever drawn in my entire life, and I'm extremely pleased with the result. If you're interested in learning to draw, I encourage you to give it a try, but honestly, don't do it the way I did. Put in the slow, day-by-day, consistent practice. Get good slowly. There's no rush, and every day you'll improve bit by bit. If you enjoyed this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you could follow the Kickstarter campaign for my novella, The Dragon Slayers. If you like heist-style stories about putting a team together but no one knows who they can trust, you'll love this book, and your support allows me to do more fun challenges like this in the future. Thank you so much for watching, all the best in your endeavors, and God bless.